very special. And what a lovely school this is. This really is. And this is an award-winning space, this particular library, and I can see why. And it's absolutely fantastic. So you're lucky to be here, but they are lucky to have you. We are, from one point of view, no more than a wave in the ocean, than sand, a grain of sand on the seashore, dust on the surface of infinity. What difference can any of us possibly make? 2004 was the 10th anniversary of one of the worst acts of genocide in recent history, namely the horrendous slaughter in Rwanda in 1994, where 800,000 people were murdered, Tutsis by the Hutus, in a mere 100 days, most of them by machete. And of course the result was that Rwanda 10 years later was full of orphans whose parents had been killed. And she was watching this program about these orphans in most dire circumstances. And she found herself thinking to myself, hang on, I'm Jewish. We're supposed to do something about things like that. In Israel, I came across for the first time a fascinating individual called Avraham Israel. Avraham Israel was a Jewish kid growing up in Egypt when, in 1956, the Suez campaign happened. After that, it was simply unsafe for any Jew to continue to live in Egypt. And so he and his family escaped to France, but such were the conditions in Egypt at the time that they had to leave behind them everything they owned. So by the time they came to France, they were utterly penniless, had no money even for food. And in order to eat at all, they had to go to a soup kitchen, a charity kitchen. Well, after a few years, they were able to go to America. Abraham Israel became a businessman and reasonably successful and made Aliyah. And when he went to Yerushalayim, on his first Shabbos on his way to Shul, he saw a destitute woman in the street, begging in the street. And his first thought was, when I was like that, somebody helped me. So I think I ought to help. Here were people who, there weren't extraordinary people. The thing about him and about Avram Israel and Nan Haman, well, they're people like you and me. But somehow or other, either explicitly or intuitively, they thought like the Rambam. We can make a difference. We can, in some small way, tilt the moral balance. The United States experiment was quite deliberately constructed to avoid any central religious authority, any established church. So in Britain, where there's an Archbishop of Canterbury and an established church, there's a chief rabbi. Whereas in the United States, and Canada has to some extent especially, Toronto been influenced by the United States, there is congregational autonomy. There is no central authority. And that applies not only to the Jewish community, it applies to all the Christian and other religious communities. So that's why there is one in Britain, or why there isn't one in America, in USA or Canada. Number two, how did I get here? It was a long way. I began life as a secular philosopher, which I taught philosophy. Then, just because I felt I really didn't know enough about my own faith, I studied Judaism. Later, having already had a career as a secular philosopher, I studied in our rabbinical seminary. The question was, he disagrees and takes offense at the idea that before Judaism came to the world, there was no meaning to life. I suggest you make a serious study of myth. I suggest you make a serious study of Sophocles and Aeschylus, the great Greek tragedians. I think you should study that seriously, and when in a year's time you've read all those books, you'll come back and tell me if you still make it. And why people get excited about hockey or football or soccer or baseball has got nothing to do with the rules of soccer or baseball. They have to do with, all sorts of things to do with how people were in the hunter-gatherer stage, and the tribal instinct, etc., etc. In other words, the meaning of the system lies outside the system. Does that make sense to you? So, until Abraham came along, there was nothing outside the system. The gods were within nature. They were part of nature. So life didn't have a meaning because the meaning lies outside the system. And there was nothing outside the system. When Abraham comes along and believes in a God who transcends the universe, for the first moment, the possibility of a meaning to life became clear. And that's why there was no concept of a meaningful life other than a tragic one in ancient consciousness until Judaism came around. And that is the answer to your question. Something outside of you will call on you to do something. And that's what I always found.